great pleasure of introducing Adam Zielinski. Adam is the CEO of a fantastic company based out of Canada called SOPHeroes. SOPHeroes focus on providing, really cutting edge, up-to-date, modern, and cool standard operating procedures for their clients. And I think Adam, out of that experience, has a wealth of knowledge and experience to share with us today about how to use SOPs to really help a company grow. So Adam, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Happy to be here. Excited to dig in and spend a little bit of time going down the rabbit hole of SOPs, and hopefully the information shared today can help to benefit the day-to-day of those watching, right? I mean, I might be a little biased because I am CEO of SOPHeroes, but I would say that SOPs are such a cornerstone to any business, whether it's a startup mom and pop shop, whether it's somebody who's well established in a Fortune 500. I think there is so many benefits and rewards to be sought from implementing and standardizing your business, and so implementing those SOPs. So would love to spend a little bit of time diving in. I did have a slide deck with me here, so I can go ahead and share my screen if that works.
Please do.
And we can just dive right in. Appreciate the intro. Standard operating procedures, they're a bit of a task to undertake, right? And it all starts through understanding what's involved and what's entailed. And so, as Ben had mentioned, we're a Canadian-based company, but we work with clients around the globe because, like I mentioned, SOPs can stem from anywhere. And so what we do is take a really customized approach. And just to paint a bit of a picture on how we work with clients, and some of the work that we do is forming really strategic partnerships, and I think that's a key pillar to creating those documents, right? And when we create SOPs, you're doing so because you'd like to check a few boxes in your business and leveraging various aspects of that. What that could entail, sometimes we're checking all of these boxes. Sometimes you're just looking for one, whether it's to increase my efficiencies, whether I'd like to reduce risk or eliminate my redundancies, whether it's more time or peace of mind. But really, it's customizing the documentation to you and your teams. And so that's the first step, is really understanding what the value is, what defines success in your world through implementing and creating these standard operating procedures. Time and time again, we've seen, and I've worked with many clients who are working to document their business, but with no end goal. And so we really need to define what that looks like in order for us to see has this been a successful endeavor. And so we look at a few key factors here when we look at standard operating procedures, understanding why and how and some of these different areas. And so first and foremost, when I'm looking at standard operating procedures and I'm trying to deliver clarity to chaos, if I'm looking to implement standardization, maybe it's a specific role, maybe it's across a department, my entire business, and understanding those accountabilities, I think it can be broken down to three of these categories. Is one, understanding the operational complexity and consistencies within your business. So whether you're a restaurant or whether you're a pharmaceutical business, it's important to understand all of those key areas. And that includes things like your team members. What are they doing on a daily basis? And really taking what's called a process inventory to understand what's going on a day-to-day. Understanding the complexities and the intricacies within each role. And sometimes what we find is there's a lot of very generic SOP templates and things in the world today. You could very easily Google that. But what happens there is nothing there is capturing the nuances within your business. Nothing there is capturing what your team does on a day-to-day. And nothing there is capturing where you want your business to go. And that sort of touches on that second piece there. But what you want to do is really break that down so we can create clarity around what those operational consistencies mean, how do they look, and ultimately, how do they lead to growth and scalability potential? So if, for example, if I'm a new restaurant, that might be a piece there that I'm really looking at is, what is my growth? Maybe I'm a franchise or somebody that wants to scale quickly. How are SOPs going to help me to do that? So whether it's opening new locations, whether it's onboarding and training new team members, so many different facets that are involved there. And so by digging in and understanding what that scalability potential looks like, will then also empower and enable you to better train and meet your compliance needs. And so we look at this piece from a future and also a current perspective. So, we always want to be focused on continuous improvement. I think that's a pivotal area, especially in how how our worlds evolve on a day to day. And so these three items here, I think, are really where business owners and entrepreneurs need to look deep into to say, okay, SOPs make sense, but where in my business do they fit best? Is it to solve operational complexities? Is it part of that growth and scalability? Is it training and compliance? And ultimately, there's nothing wrong if it's a requirement to have all three. And so we'll dig in a little bit deeper on what that means, what that could look like, but really understanding and what are those first steps that need to be taken to really implement those SOPs. So as I mentioned, we talked about identifying where we are. And so that's a key factor, doing a process inventory. I've worked with billion-dollar companies that have almost zero documentation and they continue to trudge along, but barely. I've worked with startup companies that have hundreds of pages of documentation. And so it's not a one size fits all. And it's important to understand where on the process continuum are you? What do you have that's available today, but also what do you have that's being utilized today? And so that's a key differentiator. I could have mountains of documentation, but if I have zero implementation structured around my SOPs, they're not a lot of use. And so it's really important to understand, okay, am I somebody that's brand new? Am I starting with a blank canvas? If so, that's great. We need to start to map out exactly what areas of my business, creating a bit of a gap analysis to see where in my business are the holes or where are those immediate lifts that I'll see through SOPs. Once again, that goes back into where are you taking your business? If you're somebody who's brand new, you're looking to scale, you're growing, you're onboarding, you're bringing new people. For those that maybe have an established business of 5 or 10 years, what we see there most typically is process frustration. I've been operating, but now I've grown to a place where there's so much going on. Unfortunately, maybe I haven't had the opportunity to document as much as I'd liked. And because of that, now my business, my team are struggling, whether it's through burnout, whether it's through inconsistencies in my work. So clearly identifying where we land on this timeline will help you then decide what step to take next, especially if you have SOPs or documentation already. Even if it's things that aren't utilized, that's okay. What you can do is flip the switch. You can utilize those previous documented items as a foundation or a pillar to kick things off and then to build and branch onto. It's always easier to piggyback off things that you already have and amend as you move forward rather than recreating. So really what you're doing is you're adding on and then shifting, making sure that everything has the same tonality, the same look, the same feel to get you to that finish line. Everybody, no matter where you are on this continuum, the goal is always the same. To have a fully documented library of information, a repository where your team, those individuals can go to understand what I need, what I can do, and how to do it. And so what this does is, one, from a leadership perspective, as an entrepreneur, it's going to take more off your plate. It's going to allow you to focus on revenue generating activities, especially when you have, when you're starting to bring on and have team members, more clearly defined accountabilities for them, which in turn will lead to you focusing on growing, scaling that business. Less people knocking on your door to say, where do I go for this or how do I do that? More clearly defined day to day. And so that's exactly what we're looking for. When we look at the power of SOPs, we're looking, once again, I use the analogy a lot, but checking the boxes. It's either I'd like to make my business manageable, scalable, sellable, which means ultimately, whether you're looking at one of those, whether I'm looking to become more sellable, so maybe I'm looking for a succession plan, whether I'm looking to take an exit or to take a step back from my business, whether I want to grow and scale, create more franchises or more locations, or grow my team or my revenue, my top or bottom line, become more manageable. So those are those businesses that are established, but a little bit more chaos in the day to day. Whether you're looking to satisfy one of those or all three, ultimately you're going to lead or be left with repeatable excellence, increased adoption, and having an inventory of SOPs or documentation that's always up to date. So when we say repeatable excellence, we refer to that as a process roadmap for you and your teams. Once again, identifying which team, which individual role or accountability needs that clear definition. And more often than not, we typically like to see the entire business documented in that way. But what we want to do is map out each piece so that everything is clearly defined and outlined. Increased adoption. So this is where we see SOPs sort of fall when they're not utilized and implemented correctly. However, if we have a centralized place of current information, what we see is increased adoption from the team members as well. And so by implementing a strategy of actually working with your team so they understand how to leverage this information, how to utilize it within their day to day, you'll see that increased adoption. And ultimately, having an always up to date repository. So, what that means is if I know the information is current, I'm going to utilize that. And so, that all of these typically funnel into one another, and strategizing on that implementation piece is key. Now, one of our recommendations that we make typically is whether it's an established business or an entrepreneur, that adoption piece is a critical factor to success. And generally appointing somebody to handle that is kind of rule of thumb, I would say. So as an entrepreneur, what we see, and I'll talk to this a little bit later because we do see a lot of barriers to entry when it comes to documentation. Some a little more nuanced than you would think, but others that are actually quite blatant that really stick out. And one of the ones that we see most often is that implementation. So we always suggest to have somebody as sort of the SOP cheerleader, right? So somebody who manages, oversees, and ensures that they're up to date, whether it's a yearly or a bi-yearly, whatever it is, an audit, a review, working with teams from a continuous improvement standpoint, but then also engaging with team members and creating a learning factor of how do we utilize these within my role within the business. Because just to have documentation, it's not a lot of use if your team doesn't utilize it. So nominating somebody as an SOP captain or somebody who's a key stakeholder that can continue to carry that forward. And if you're a solo entrepreneur, then that would then lie on you. But what that's going to do is help to streamline your day to day, whether it's client engagements, whether it's, like I said, onboarding new clients or offboarding, all of these different facets. And I'll talk to some of those success factors of what can we see when we implement good SOPs. The gold standard of SOPs is always evolving, and you want to make sure you are as well. And I'll speak to that a little bit as well. But gone are the days of standardizing your procedures through a 300-page PDF or a binder that sits on a shelf somewhere. And so this is just a snapshot of some clients that we've worked with to showcase that it's not a one size fits all, but all of them have the same need, which is, or one of those three that we spoke to. They're either looking to make their business more manageable, more scalable, or sellable. But they're doing so because they're also evolving and understand that it's not a static world anymore. You need to be dynamic. And what we mean there is leveraging various tools or systems that can help drive your business and drive that engagement piece through the documentation. There is a ton of documentation, software, tools, and resources that you can leverage, but without understanding how to utilize them, they kind of fall flat. So, once again, that's part of that discovery. That's part of the analysis that you do alongside your process inventory. Once you've mapped out your business and once we've decided, okay, here's all the critical areas that require documentation, then you can start to also map out what tool or system will best support these initiatives, whether it's from training or onboarding, whether it's to actually from an ease of access standpoint. So these are items that we always need to keep in the, in the forefront of our mind is how are we evolving? SOPs won't be utilized, and they typically get a bad rap nowadays because if we look back at SOPs over the last 20 years, that's how they were. Oh, hey, go to this binder on this shelf, flip to page 149, and here's your onboarding SOP. But guess what? It's 50 steps long. Those gone are those days. And so, how do we make sure that SOPs are engaging? Easily digestible information is what we're looking for. And we get that through ensuring that we're working with key digital platforms, something that will solve those needs. And guess what? A lot of the times, and a lot of the clients that we meet already are already utilizing a platform that will actually enhance their SOPs, but they just don't know it, right? So, taking a little bit of a deeper dive into what am I using today? Understanding those tools and resources, and that's something that we do quite frequently is walk us through what you use from a software standpoint. Oh, well, I use this, or I use Notion, or I use Process Street, or I use Trainual. Oh, well, guess what? Actually, you can embed your SOPs here, but here's how you can take it one step further. And so understanding how you can digest, and then how can you engage with that information with your teams. So I talked about this a little bit earlier, but we see primary barriers all of the time. And as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as leaders, these are things that you'll probably have seen in the past. But here are some of the items that when we engage with businesses across the globe, we'll see people actually lack the awareness or understanding of what does an SOP do, or what is the benefits that I'm looking for it to deliver. And so once again, that's clearly defining and understanding and setting goals for you and your business and where you'd like to be and how those SOPs are going to get you there. Resistance to change, and we see that a lot. Well, they'll say, Adam, we've been doing things the same way for 20 years and it hasn't failed us now. But, this goes back to our previous slide of SOPs, businesses are evolving, and are you? And so it's critical to ensure that you're staying up to date with not just what's going on with your industry, but with technology that can help support that. An area that we excel in and that we partner with is providing that expertise or guidance, which a lot of individuals know how to run their business. An entrepreneur, a leader, a manager, they know how to do that. But a lot of the times that information will live in the brain, live in the mind of somebody rather than being a living and breathing document. And sometimes extracting that can be a bit of a challenge. So once again, how do I map out that information and create that repository of documentation? Sometimes complexity of the business can really form a barrier because and we hear this a lot. Well, this is too much. There's so much. There's too many moving pieces. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. I will say that there's no such thing. As long as you utilize, once again, tools or systems and map everything out from a role to accountability, creating workflows and understanding how things run on a day to day will allow you to better extract and present this information in a digestible fashion. Poor communication and implementation. So we talked about this piece. I've seen companies that have some of the best SOPs that I've seen, but their strategy and execution is non-existent. And so if your team members are unaware of how to leverage that information, then you might as well not have it, right? And so creating a strategy that involves awareness and creating almost a bit of a sense of urgency behind all of this documentation will lead to increased implementation and usage. But the number one barrier that we see from businesses and from entrepreneurs is resource constraints. Whether that's monetary, the primary one would be time, that opportunity cost piece, because SOPs are an investment of time, and they're not built overnight, unless you are Googling those basic templates, which once again will not solve the needs of your business because they don't capture all of those nuances. but it's usually that time factor where we engage. And so really to be successful in implementing and scaling your business or your operations through SOPs is making sure that you make a commitment to getting it done. And typically that can be an hour a week, an hour a day, but keeping a consistent schedule. And that's typically how we work with our clients is we use an hour a day, or sorry, an hour a week. We'll meet, we'll fact find, gather data, and review, revise, and rework information. We'll take all of that away and we'll then build that out for teams, right? Making it really easy for you to continue to work on those revenue generating those growth activities, right? But that would be the biggest piece is engagement from leadership, from ownership, or those entrepreneurs, those that want to see the business grow. But more often than not, we'll see somebody start an SOP project and it'll fizzle out. It's important to keep engagement from yourself, but also from the key stakeholders that you're working with. And so don't feel like SOPs need to fall 100% onto you. You can utilize your team members or your subject matter experts to help create these. These are the people that live and breathe within your business. And so, if you have teams, definitely lean on them to help you drive the growth and the creation of SOPs. As a business owner or entrepreneur, you'll have the final stamp or the stamp of approval, but ultimately you have the resources available, utilize them if you can. So here's some things that we look to deliver through SOPs. Here's some of the results that we want to see, what we want to drive, and we'll start with the first. It's time savings, right? We talked about it a little bit. It's a time commitment to create SOPs, but what you're getting back as a final result would be that time savings factor, because it will then decrease the amount of times individuals are knocking on your door. It'll allow them to effectively understand what they're doing and will allow you to continue to work on and focus on those growth activities. But we also see a reduction in rework and errors by clearly defining roles, accountabilities, and specific areas of your business. You'll have clearly documented, easy to follow instructions that ultimately will reduce any errors that take place. If everything is clearly defined, this goes back to that action strategy. The implementation strategy that we've talked about is if you have clear, outlined, and a strong implementation plan, if your team members are following their SOPs, you're going to see a reduction in that rework. And ultimately, creating a better experience for those that work for you. So as you continue to grow and build your team, you obviously want to ensure that you've got a strong retention. And what we see is team members that are supported with tools that they need to succeed within their role will have a better experience. Once again, that's taking a deeper dive into that role and what are the success factors of a specific role. And no role is too big or too small to define. We do it every day, whether it's a front of house cashier of a restaurant or whether it's a COO of a pharmaceutical company. Every role has its part to play. And by clearly defining and creating tools and resources that will help support those roles, will increase your retention. And ultimately, and one of the biggest areas that we see for creating documentation is ultimately leading to shorter or more efficient onboarding and training. And so that's a big one. That goes back to where are my units of time going? Where am I allocating my day-to-day units of time? Is it, am I spending 6 hours onboarding? What if we can make that 3 hours? And so by creating a streamlined approach of onboarding, training, and implementation through there, once again, it's giving you time back to focus on additional growth. We also want to see a better increased retention rate of clients and customers or patients, whether you're a healthcare practitioner or once again, maybe you're a restaurant or a manufacturer. These are all key areas. When you're standardizing your business by creating that end goal, what does that goalpost look like for a client experience? And sort of reverse engineer it from there. If I know that that they want to be putting through $1 million order, what does that look like to get them there? What are the steps? What are the things that need to be, from whether it's lead handling and engagement to building out proper CRM handling to follow-ups? All of these items here are clearly mapped out and strategized and once again provided for you and your teams to leverage. And then finally, we talked about this earlier, but a lot of companies are looking to make their business sellable. A lot of entrepreneurs are looking to make an exit. And so we can see an increased valuation of anywhere from 5 to 15% of businesses that can demonstrate effective use of SOPs. And this goes from a succession planning standpoint as well. Perhaps you're not looking to sell. Maybe you're looking to acquire more funding. This is also a piece here that that can help to get you there. So all of these items here, once again, go back to where do I need to be, or what are the goals that I need to achieve? And so that's the, I would say, one of the key factors of creating SOPs. You can start to document your business right now, but if you don't have a goal in mind, if you don't know what you want these SOPs to achieve, there won't be a lot of use. You need to define where you'd like to be and then utilize those SOPs to help get you and your teams there. So success with SOPs. Once again, we've talked about this a lot, but we do what's called, we can do an analysis, identifying a need. So whether it's, I want to scale my business, I have operational inconsistencies, I want to make my business more manageable. What is your need for those SOPs? And so writing that out and understanding where those pitfalls lie, or what problems you'd like to solve, will then make that next step of analyzing your business a little easier. What that looks like is creating a process roadmap or inventory of how things lie today and where you'd like them to be. We spoke about defining success. So once again, is it I want to shave time off, onboarding and training. I want to get to, I'm starting a franchise, and right now it takes me 3 weeks to open a new franchise. I want to get that down to 2 weeks. What are those steps that are involved? Defining success is what will build success around this process, and then creating a roadmap around that. We do with SOPHeroes, we always like to do what's called a discovery session. And so this is a power hour of information. It's almost like an intense game of 20 questions. You can do this yourself. Start high level and start digging deep into, okay, who am I as a business? Who are my key team players? What are the tools, the software, the resources? What has my retention been? What are some of the gaps that I'm seeing? Who's my competition? A bit of an analysis on all of these items will help you map out where and what you want to do in terms of documentation. Then you need to invest. We talked about this a little bit as well, but investing time, your time, the time of your team members or your subject matter experts. Unfortunately, SOPs they don't come out of thin air just yet, but in the meantime, you can utilize all of the great people in your business or the knowledge that you've acquired and spending that time to build out these SOPs. Investing in a tool or a resource, something that will help you aggregate all of the information that you have and build it out into a beautiful living and breathing repository is key. And then execute, engage, and make sure you stick to that. That's as I mentioned, that's what we see as the biggest factor is people will start documenting their business, but the business always takes priority. And so what we'll see is, oh, I've got an emergency, or I've got to help Mr. and Mrs. Client. And so these are all natural things. It's okay for those to happen, but you need to stick to an execution plan. And like I said, whether it's an hour a week, 30 minutes a day, ultimately, or better yet, reach out to SOPHeroes and we can give you a hand with that as well. That's exactly what we specialize in, and nothing wrong there to work with somebody who's a subject matter expert in methodology, who can help assist and works with entrepreneurs all day long to build that out. Ultimately, that's actually where we see the biggest some of the biggest wins when it comes to documentation is work with an expert to help you get there. And so, we can definitely help assist anybody who's on this call or watching this call down the road. If you ever like to reach out for SOP Heroes, this is exactly what we do, right? Is we check all of these boxes. We'll help you to analyze, to define, to create, and to execute while you and your team continue to function and drive your business. As I mentioned, we do these discovery reports almost daily with clients. And typically what we do is, as I mentioned, take a deeper dive underneath the hood of the business, understanding where the gaps are, where they lie, and how we can really help to create a lift. And so what I would say is, and typically these are paid sessions with SOP Heroes, but because Benjamin has been so kind enough to invite me onto this call, and anybody who'd like to take advantage of meeting with me and doing a discovery session for your business, what I'd be happy to do is provide a bit of a discount as well, or just a bit of a promotional investment there for you and your teams to join in. It's not limited just to one person. If you have multiple stakeholders, the more the merrier. I'm happy to get perspective, but involving the various team members is key, right? Everybody has a bit of a skin in the game in the business, and so when they're able to provide a little bit of their food for thought, really helps to get a holistic view of the business. But I would be happy to offer a bit of a discovery session for whoever might be interested. 90-minute discovery session. And in turn, we'll actually provide you a fully detailed report and execution roadmap. This is fully customized for your business. We're going to create different strategies, either whether you'd like to work with SOP Heroes, but we'll also provide you strategies and key tips on how to execute this internally, whether that's a path you'd like to take as well. We're going to clearly define or create an index of SOPs and show you exactly the scale of holy cow, there's 100 SOPs here that'll actually help to drive my business, but will also help to create them in a way that's easily digestible and functional for your team. Just to show you, and just to show what a bit of an index could look like, this is one that was done for a company we've worked with called Innovation Learning. But this is a roadmap that we built out and how we've segmented a business. And so we've done so in this instance by department, from operations to finance, and then we've created primary buckets. And as you can see in the beige and below are all those items that fill those buckets, right? And so that's sort of that process analysis, process inventory that we've taken to help then create a roadmap for this program. So Ben, and those on the call, I really appreciate the time today. I could spend hours going into getting super fine and granular on what it means, but really creating SOPs is not as much of a challenge as those might think. The challenging part is creating a definition around what they mean, the results that you want them to deliver, and then the execution behind them. But I'm here to answer any questions. I really appreciate the time. Outside of today's call, don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to the SOP Heroes anytime, SOPHeroes.com. And I'm sure Ben can provide or maybe even I can provide a Calendly link here if anybody would like to reach out and connect with me as well. But I'll open it up to questions there as well. And thank you again, Ben.
Cool, Adam. Thank you so much. I think it's such a crazy topic in the sense that it's perceived to be, how to say that, not the super sexiest topic people could think of, but then once you start working on it and once people do implement SOPs well, it's a game changer, right? Really, it really is. And thanks for shedding some light here. And Adam, I'd like to use the last 10 minutes I have you here with us to ask a few questions, because I think if I run a business today and I don't have SOPs, there are probably a few questions that come to mind pretty quickly, and I would like to hear your perspective on those. The first being, what about ChatGPT? What about AI? Can I, as a business owner, or should I, as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur that just got started, as somebody that's looking to onboard or grow, should I, or could I, or can I use AI or ChatGPT and the likes to create my SOPs?
That's a great question, and one that we're starting to see more and more of. Once again, I would say that ChatGPT or using Google, if I Google templates of SOPs, or utilize ChatGPT to say, write me an SOP for, let's say I'm a restaurant and I say, write me an SOP for onboarding a new cashier of my restaurant. What ChatGPT is an aggregate of data across the globe. And what they do is spit out, once again, a very generic, a very high level SOP or some sort of documentation. What that fails to do is to capture the nuances of your business, right? And so I firmly believe that taking an inward look into what you do on a day-to-day and capturing that is vital. You can utilize, but you're left with something that's very generic. We still want to capture the essence of a specific business. And that's why, for example, as SOPHeroes, we customize everything that's done. We may utilize AI tools or softwares or resources to help complement some of these initiatives, but really it's having a dedicated writer that knows the ins and outs of all your business. You can't bring ChatGPT into your restaurant and walk it through. Here's how I put together my secret burger. Here's my sauce and all of these different nuances, right? And so really it's very challenging when you have somebody that's engaged in that piece, that's actually meeting with you and your teams, somebody who's an expert in methodology. That's where the magic really starts to happen, is partnering with somebody like yourself or another entrepreneur who's that subject matter expert. By bringing these two elements together, that's where you're left with some of the most cutting edge documentation you can get.
Yeah, no, okay. So basically, you say ChatGPT as an aggregator of information that's out there, but produces obviously generic content and does not capture the X factor, the USP, the thing that you do well, right? Okay, understood. And then the other thing, because this is something we hear day in, day out from people we work with, but also from, I mean, you've seen this before, and I think every entrepreneur has, is the notion of people are just not following my procedures. They just don't do what I want them to do. They don't do it the way that I want them to do it. So now, assuming there are SOPs in place and adoption is low, right? And you touched on this quite a bit already in what you presented. But what would be your key factor of really increasing adoption of SOPs? Because as you said, if they're having SOPs is one thing, having them adopted is what you actually want. So what would you say is the key ingredient to actually having your team use your standards?
That's another great question, one that we get asked frequently as well. And it's funny because I always say, I always have a famous answer to this. It's creating an SOP on utilizing SOPs. And so by clearly strategizing how you implement that, setting expectations with your team is key. As an entrepreneur or a leader or a manager within an organization, it is critical to have those conversations with teams that we now, Mr. and Mrs. Team Member, I've now created. We now have a beautiful repository of information. It's a two-prong approach of, let me spend some time with you on helping you to create understanding on how to leverage it, when to leverage it, and how it'll impact your job, your day-to-day, or how your role within the organization. But then creating almost an embedded system of, we need to utilize this. And that's why I say having a captain or somebody, a leadership team member who actually ensures that that's being utilized. You can get, once again, leverage tools or softwares that show or outline usability, who's been into where, actually provide more details and analytics behind some of that. But really, it's having a clear strategy and an SOP on executing that. We now have our library. What are my next steps? How do I cascade this information down to team? And so it can be a blanket cascade. Okay, we're going to send a mass communication. We're then going to do little, depending if it's based on departments, maybe each department meets and reviews. But you need to set that as a key expectation, that there's no more fluctuating, right? This should be a table stake within their role. If that investment has been made to create SOPs, then that needs to then become table stake or standard within a role description as well, to utilize that information.
Yeah, okay, very interesting. So it's basically about forcing people to engage with that content. And I mean, forcing sounds very negative, right? But basically developing a strategy with which you ensure that people have touch points with that documentation, right? It's okay, good. So and that can really depend on your use case, I would assume, right? What you're trying to accomplish there.
Yes, very much so.
Okay, very cool. One last question, because I think that's especially for people who try, who might want to bootstrap this and say, I want to do this in-house. You mentioned consistency as one of the major roadblocks for a successful project. And I mean, also from my understanding, that's why SOPHeroes services are so well perceived, is because you create that consistency just by showing up weekly, by having accountability with between the writer and the client, right? But if I don't have that relationship, that engagement, what would be some maybe tricks for you, or that you would recommend an entrepreneur just starting off, somebody who wants to give this a shot internally? What are some tricks to create that consistency in driving my own internal SOP effort?
For sure. Great questions there, Ben. I would say that consistency one is, and I utilize this not just for client meetings and engagement, but for my own day to day, is scheduling standing meetings for myself. So get and block off some time in your calendar that's focused just on you. That's the biggest piece, is we're looking, and especially for entrepreneurs starting out, you're wearing 50 different hats, and so it's very easy to become sidetracked. But it's utilizing that time that's blocked for you to then spend time reviewing, mapping out, and understanding your business, and then creating your documentation behind that. I would say leaning, if you have team members involved within your business, leverage their expertise as well. And once again, whether it's 30 minutes a day or an hour a week, as long as you have that little bit of consistency. And there's a saying that's, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. And so even if you're doing so at 30 minutes a day or an hour a week, in 6 months' time, you'll look and say, holy cow, I've got quite the layout of documentation at this point, right? And so it's just doing those little pieces. But that's typically where we start to see things fail. And then it can snowball, because now I'm scaling my business. Things are going very rapidly. There's lots on the go. Maybe I have new team members, but oh shoot, now I need to spend more time onboarding because I didn't spend that 30 minutes a week 6 months ago building out an onboarding SOP, right? And so don't let those things kind of come back to bite you. That consistency is such a critical factor. That engagement piece will be what makes or breaks a successful SOP project. Did I lose you?
Okay, Adam, I think you're just cutting out. Maybe it's me, but
Oh, you're just on mute there. There we go.
isn't it funny that while you were talking about consistency, my internet connection breaks up? Somewhat inconsistent. Adam, so no, I think that's a great takeaway, right? Rather invest have an hour a day, or maybe just an hour a week over a longer period of time, instead of trying to, bulk it up and do like this big one-time effort. Because I mean that's something we see also in our consulting projects. The results that you have with small consistent efforts over long periods of time are typically far outweighing these large and big condensed project-based approaches, right, that are also very painful to execute. So I think takeaway for consistency here is be realistic, but block off time to work on it every single week, right?
Yeah, very, very much so. And even for those larger companies or entrepreneurs that may have scaled, don't be discouraged if you're at a point of chaos in your business where you don't have much documentation. Like I said, it's never a bad time to get your business documented. And I've worked with we have a client that has about a $400 million a year operating budget, over 700 SOPs, and before we joined with them, they had 700 employees and no SOPs to support that before we joined with them. Is it achievable? Absolutely, but it may take a little bit longer once you're up there. But there's never, once again, a bad time to get your business and your team standardized, your operations standardized, and creating that next step for growth. So.
Very cool. Adam, thank you so much for this insight. Also, we'll gladly share a link to obviously the SOP's website as well as to your calendar if somebody wants to take you up on the offer of that special discount on a first discovery report, which I know out of own experience is a very valuable thing to do, regardless of which direction you move into afterwards, right? So thank you for bringing all that experience and knowledge today to this webinar, and also for providing that discount for us. Thanks for joining us and sharing your SOP knowledge, Adam.
It's my pleasure, Ben. Thank you so much. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and we will chat with you soon.